to discuss Obama's year-end press conference. For the depth, we're now joined live over the phone with a former U.S. diplomat and a foreign policy expert, Jim Jatras. Hello, Jim. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Jay. Good to talk to you again. How are you?
Oh, well, we are doing great, all things considered. But, Jim, what's going on with Barack Obama? I watched his year-end press conference. You know, when you think of Barack Obama, you think of being a guy that's calm, cool, and collected. And that press conference was really something else.
Yeah, he's like the incredible shrinking president at this point. I mean, I've heard of lame ducks, but this I think was a very peculiar performance. He seemed to be just sort of rambling and thinking out loud, but really saying nothing particularly new or interesting.
No, but that's it. And he did. Well, the conference was dominated by the Russian question. So why do you think that is? What's going on here?
Well, what I thought was interesting about that is what he did not say. I don't know how much listeners are aware of this effort to what, in my mind, is to subvert the Electoral College, to try to contact the electors not to cast their votes for Donald Trump on Monday and actually achieve what some people are calling a soft coup. Obviously the Clinton campaign, the elements of the intelligence community, the media are involved in that. Frankly, I consider it something of a conspiracy. What I thought was interesting is that Obama gave no comfort to that. He talked as though, yes, Trump's going to be inaugurated on January 20th. There was no indication he gave that any of this information should be relevant, or these allegations should be relevant to what the electors do. So I don't know what that means, but he didn't go as far out on the limb as he might have.
It is interesting because, as you say, he didn't go that far out on a limb. But on the other hand, he didn't, just by addressing it, he acknowledged it as well. And, that brings us to the question. You see, like, there's a lot of, Russian hacking, maybe some intelligence groups say that it happened. You have other intelligence groups that, may or may not that say it happened. But the simple fact of addressing it kind of acknowledges the fact that he's in this camp, right?
Yeah, yes, it does. And it is interesting, too, that just before his press conference, there was a news report. Again, you can guess how reliable it is, that finally the NSA and the FBI had been battered into submission and were supporting the CIA's findings. Look, this is politicized intelligence. This is, in my mind, the equivalent of what happened under the Bush administration with WMDs in Iraq, is that, unfortunately, like any other bureaucracy, the intelligence services are susceptible to pressure from the political authorities. And I think that's clear what's going on here, especially on the critical question, was this information that showed up in WikiLeaks from leaks or from hacks? And there's no evidence of which I'm aware, and certainly none has been presented by any government agencies or by the news media that are their lapdogs, that this was actually the result of hacking anybody as opposed to leaks from inside the bureaucracy somewhere.
Yeah, but that's the point exactly there. There has been a person, Craig Murray. He was a former British ambassador to Uzbekistan. He came forward and said, hey, guys, I personally flew to America. He listed a specific park in Washington, D.C. He said somebody gave me the information, and that's where WikiLeaks got it. I mean, the thing about the CIA and all this talk, it's all anonymous sources. The Proper Not website, anonymous source. But here is a guy, a person, a face, and he used to have a position of authority that said, look at me. I'm the one. And I don't see that getting a lot of airplay in the U.S.
No. If you look at the mainstream media for that aspect of the story, you hear crickets chirping. They just keep repeating the same old, even Fox News, which is supposed to be the adversary of the Obama administration, an adversary of Hillary Clinton, is telling exactly the same story. And it's the same kind of stenographer journalism where my government sources tell me the following, and then they simply repeat it. And nothing outside of the box, nothing outside of that narrative is allowed to impinge. So where do we get the Craig Murray story? We get it on RT, we get it on Sputnik, we get it on InfoWars, we get it on Breitbart, we get it from the alt media, which of course by definition is conspiracy theories.
I just find it interesting because, maybe the guy's making it up. I don't know. Maybe it's not true, but at least he's on record with saying that, and maybe, people should grill him and try to come to understanding if what he's saying is true or not. It just seems, I don't know, a little strange. Listen, if we take a step back for a moment, you mentioned that NSA, CIA, FBI, this really seems to be like a CIA directive. But are we talking about some type of, I don't know, inter-conflict in the security agencies? Are they battling over their turf here? Is that what's happening?
Well, Jay, how do we know? Because let's remember, nobody's ever seen any of this report. Even the people in Congress, the senators and congressmen, have not seen anything from the CIA or the intelligence community itself. They're going by the media report. And in fact, when some people in Congress asked to get a briefing on what exactly was going on, this is unprecedented. The intelligence agencies refused to provide them with a briefing. What, are they too busy or something? So we really don't know, to tell the truth, where this is coming from. Is it just the CIA? Is it just certain people within the CIA, like maybe Director Brennan? We simply do not know what is at the basis of this story, not only how hard or not hard the information is, but from which factions of the intelligence community it's coming from. So yes, there very well may be a conflict. We really don't know.
But that's the point. I mean, this is a very serious issue about very serious things, and going out there and saying that, another head of state purposely, directed this. I mean, that I don't see how you could walk that back. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns here, but these accusations have serious consequences, or maybe that's just the way that I see them at this level. Anyways, with that said, during his speech, Obama had mentioned that Russia was smaller and a weaker country than the U.S. He added that America's vulnerability to Russia is directly related to how divided and partisan and dysfunctional the U.S. political processes is. He even talked about domestic propaganda. I don't remember if he threw Rush Limbaugh in there or not, but it seems like he might have. So some people are saying that it sounded like reassurance to those who are concerned about the growth of Russian influence. What's your take on all of that?
As far as the country being divided, well, great. There's a news bulletin. Of course, this country is extremely divided, and it has been for a long time. I don't see how you blame the Russians for that. And the fact that you have, coming from government sources and the mainstream media, this whole narrative about not only Russian alleged hacking, but fake news, that somehow those of us who are blowing the whistle on this narrative, we're the problem, not you guys, not the people who are trying to spin a certain narrative for the American public to the exclusion of any sources of information. They're not the problem. And of course, this goes back, obviously, some years, whether we're talking about the Ukraine crisis, the Syria crisis, where they've got their narrative, they don't want anybody to dispute it, and anybody who does is peddling fake news. And that's, unfortunately, the level we've reached now.
Well, it's very troubling. On Friday, a spokesman for the Russian president said that the United States should either stop accusing Russia of meddling in its elections or prove it. And yet Obama, once again, pointed the finger at Putin for hacking the U.S. election. In his conference, he promised to take action in response to Russia's actions. So, number one, what could he be talking about here? Number two, why did the unproved Russian involvement? What could he be talking about here?
I'm sorry. What could who be talking about? What Putin could be talking about, or Obama?
President Obama said that the U.S. reserves the right to take the appropriate action.
Yes. Well, what he's trying to do is cast this as, if you accept the allegations of Russian hacking, then you put it into the context of a broader pattern of alleged Russian aggressive behavior, especially in the cybersphere. So what he's saying is that we can then respond in kind. We can then wage cyber warfare against the Russians. And again, a lot of this would be very technical in terms of what those responses would look like. Let's remember that during the campaign, Hillary Clinton said that a military response to Russian cyber aggression, as she characterized it, would be appropriate. That some people said this is somebody who's willing to start World War III on a military basis on the excuse that the Russians are engaging in cyber aggression.
Well, I don't know. This entire story is somewhat difficult. Looking forward, what happens now? Is Obama maybe trying to pregame Trump's hand in order to limit the course of actions that he might have? Is this some type of, you mentioned before, is this some type of a slow-moving, soft coup? Or how do you see things playing out in the next 30 days?
I think there are people who would have hoped, and I think the chances are very small, to derail the election, the real election, by the way, the Electoral College, which occurs on Monday. I don't think that's likely to happen, but I think there are two other things they have in mind. One is to simply try to delegitimate Trump as much as possible in the eyes of enough Americans. And the other one is to try to poison the well for any rapprochement with Moscow that Trump seems to want to pursue once he becomes president. And that's where I'm, frankly, rather optimistic. Trump, despite the withering attacks he suffered during the campaign about saying, hey, why don't we get along with the Russians, never backed down, even though it might have been politically prudent for him to do so. And then even after this campaign started, who does he name for Secretary of State? Rex Tillerson, somebody known for his friendliness toward Moscow and toward President Putin. So I frankly think he relishes this fight. And those who are saying, well, boy, he's really vulnerable on this, he better watch out. I guess my response is, yeah, well, they better watch out for what happened to those 16 other Republicans he ran against and what happened to Hillary Clinton. Don't expect that he's going to be a pushover.
No, that's a great point. Trump absolutely crushed the political establishment across the board. There's no doubt about that. Listen, Jim, I would like to say thank you very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure having you here, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Speaking to us live over the phone, the former U.S. diplomat and foreign policy expert, Jim Jatras.